The Silent Exodus. The last human Kelvin had seen was a young girl, no more than 7, playing with her doll on the cobblestone streets of Meridian. Her mother had called her inside for supper, and that was it. No fanfare, no warning, just an ordinary evening that would mark the end of humanity's presence in the Nine Kingdoms. Kelvin, a seasoned elven scout, had been stationed at the border outpost for nearly 2 decades. He had watched the humans with equal parts fascination and wariness, noting their peculiar habits and their inexplicable ability to both create and destroy with unmatched passion. But nothing in his centuries of experience could have prepared him for what happened next. The Treaty of Vanishes had been the first sign. It came during the height of the Third Border War, when human armies had pushed back against the combined forces of the Elven Confederacy and the Dwarven holds. The human ambassador, dressed in simple robes rather than their usual ornate diplomatic attire, had delivered a single sheet of parchment to the High Council. "We withdraw," it read. "All conquered territories are yours, on the condition that you cease pursuit. We wish only solitude." The council had laughed at first, believing it to be another human trick. Humans were known for their deceptive strategies, their ability to turn apparent weakness into devastating strength. But this time was different. Within days, human armies began retreating from their positions, abandoning fortifications that had taken years to build. They left behind supplies, weapons, and equipment, everything except personal belongings. Kelvin remembered the confusion among his fellow scouts. Some believed it was an elaborate trap, others thought the humans had discovered something terrible that forced their withdrawal. The truth, as it turned out, was far more unsettling. One by one, human settlements fell silent. No smoke from chimneys, no sounds of children playing, no merchants hawking their wares. The transition was gradual enough that few noticed at first. Border towns went quiet, then larger settlements, and finally the great cities themselves. Commander Eloan, Kelvin's superior, had ordered a reconnaissance mission into human territory 3 months after the treaty. Kelvin led a team of 5 scouts into what had once been the bustling city of Haven's Gate. What they found haunted him still. The city stood perfectly preserved, like a painting frozen in time. Markets still displayed their wares, though now covered in a fine layer of dust. Homes contained half-eaten meals, beds still warm as if their occupants had just risen. But of the humans themselves, there was no trace. No bodies, no signs of struggle, no evidence of disease or magic. They had simply ceased to be. The investigation that followed revealed something even more disturbing. In every human settlement, from the smallest hamlet to the greatest city, they found the same symbol etched into stone, a perfect circle intersected by 3 lines, forming what appeared to be an ancient rune. But none of the 9 Kingdoms scholars could decipher its meaning. The dwarven artificers brought their most sophisticated devices, detecting traces of an energy they had never encountered before. The elven sages attempted to commune with the land itself, only to find that nature had no memory of the humans' departure. It was as if they had been carefully extracted from the fabric of reality itself. But it was the discovery in the great library of Asterion that changed everything. Hidden behind a false wall, sealed with magic that predated known human civilization, they found a chamber filled with strange artifacts. Metal constructs that hummed with unknown power, crystals that projected images of impossible landscapes, and most importantly, a book written in a language that seemed to shift and change as one read it. The book spoke of something called the Dominion, an empire that spanned not kingdoms or continents, but stars themselves. It described humanity not as natives of this world, but as refugees, hidden away from some great catastrophe that had befallen their true civilization. Kelvin sat in his outpost now, staring at the copy of the book's translation spread before him. The humans hadn't just disappeared, they had remembered who they were. And that realization terrified him more than any army or magic ever could. In the months that followed, the 9 Kingdoms attempted to maintain a semblance of normalcy. They divided the abandoned human territories among themselves, though few wished to settle in these ghost cities. The balance of power shifted, alliances reformed, and trade routes were redrawn. But at night, when the moons hung low and the wind whispered through empty streets, everyone knew, something fundamental had changed. The humans hadn't just withdrawn from the world, they had proven that everything the other races thought they knew about reality was wrong. The discovery of more artifacts in sealed chambers across former human territories only deepened the mystery. Each finding revealed fragments of a civilization far beyond anything the Nine Kingdoms could comprehend. Technologies that defied known laws of nature, records of battles fought among the stars, and most disturbingly, evidence that humans had been watching and guiding the development of the other races for millennia. The Sage Council, comprised of the wisest members from each race, convened an emergency session that lasted for weeks. Their conclusion, sealed and shared only with the highest authorities, suggested that humanity's departure might not be permanent. They had found recurring references to something called the Return in the recovered artifacts. But what that meant, and whether the Nine Kingdoms should fear or welcome it, remained unknown. As Kelvin closed his journal that night, a strange light streaked across the sky, too regular to be a shooting star, too controlled to be natural. He wasn't the only one who saw it. Across the Nine Kingdoms, observers noted increasing numbers of these lights, always moving with purpose, always in the same direction, up. The humans were gone, but they had left behind something more dangerous than armies or weapons, questions. And as the Nine Kingdoms would soon discover, some questions are better left unanswered. The first sign that the humans' departure was more than a simple disappearance came from the dwarven mines of Khazad-dûr. Deep in the ancient tunnels, miners discovered chambers that defied explanation, perfect spheres carved into solid rock, their walls lined with metal that bore no mark of tool or magic. Inside these chambers, they found more of the strange symbols, along with devices that hummed with power even after countless ages. The age of uncertainty had begun, and with it, the realization that the Nine Kingdoms' understanding of their world, and their place in it, was about to change forever. The hidden truth. The discovery in the dwarven mines of Khazad-dûr sparked a race for knowledge that would shatter the delicate peace between the remaining races. Archivist Thora Stonescript, a dwarven scholar specializing in ancient civilizations, had spent 3 months studying the mysterious spherical chambers when she made a breakthrough that would change everything. The metal walls weren't just walls, they were doors. And after centuries of silence, they were beginning to wake up. "It's responding to something," Thora announced to the gathered council of representatives from the Nine Kingdoms. "The energy readings are increasing, and the symbols, they're changing." The chamber she had been studying was one of 7 discovered across the known world, each identical in design and each bearing the same mysterious properties. But it was what lay behind those metal doors that would shake the foundations of their world. When the first door finally opened, it revealed not treasure or weapons, but knowledge. The chamber was a library, but unlike any they had ever seen. Images floated in the air, showing vast cities that stretched into the clouds, vessels that sailed between stars, and beings that wore suits of living metal. But it was the historical records that truly horrified them. "We weren't the first," Thora's voice trembled as she translated the ancient data. "This world, it's been colonized and abandoned 17 times. And humans, they weren't refugees. They were wardens." The truth, as it emerged from the ancient records, was more terrible than anyone had imagined. Earth, humanity's supposed homeland, was merely one of countless worlds they had seeded with life. The Nine Kingdoms weren't natural evolution, but carefully crafted experiments, each race designed to test different aspects of survival and adaptation. The elves' longevity, the dwarves' affinity for earth and metal, the orcs' resilience, all were engineered traits, carefully monitored over millennia by human observers who had hidden themselves among them, playing the role of just another struggling race. But why had they left now? The answer lay in the deepest level of the data archives, in files that seemed to update themselves even as they were discovered. The Dominion, humanity's true empire, was at war. A war that made the conflicts of the Nine Kingdoms look like children's squabbles. "They're fighting something they call the Void," explained Sage Elendriel, an elven archaeologist who had joined Thora's research team. An entity or force that exists between realities. And according to these records, it's winning. The revelation sparked a new wave of panic across the kingdoms. If humanity, with all its hidden power and advanced technology, was losing a war, what hope did the rest of them have? But some saw opportunity in the chaos. The Shadowmere Covenant, a secret organization that had long opposed human influence, began gathering followers. They preached that humanity's departure was a chance for true independence, for the races to forge their own destiny without invisible puppet masters pulling their strings. "We were slaves who didn't know we were enslaved," declared Lord Vex, the Covenant's mysterious leader. "Now we have a chance to become what we were meant to be, not what they designed us to be." The Covenant's influence grew, especially among those who felt betrayed by the truth of their origins. They began exploring the abandoned human facilities, seeking ways to repurpose the left-behind technology for their own use. But they weren't the only ones with plans for humanity's legacy. Deep in the Iron Spine Mountains, the dwarven artificers made a discovery that would upset the balance once again. In a sealed vault, they found what appeared to be a communication device, one that still functioned. The message it received was brief but clear: "Hold position. The return begins." Phase 1 initiated. The timing couldn't have been worse. The 9 kingdoms were fracturing, divided between those who wanted to preserve human knowledge and those who wanted to destroy all traces of their former overseers. The Shadowmere Covenant's attempts to activate human technology had already led to disasters, entire towns vanishing in flashes of light, forests transforming into crystal, and people changing in ways that defied natural law. Thora and her team worked desperately to understand the true purpose of the spherical chambers. Each seemed to be part of a larger network, components of some vast machine whose purpose they could only guess at. The energy readings continued to climb, and strange phenomena began to manifest across the world. Lights in the sky became more frequent, moving with clear purpose and pattern. The stars themselves seemed to shift, new constellations appearing overnight. And in the deepest reaches of space, something was stirring. The human archives had spoken of the return not as a homecoming, but as a last resort. Whatever they were fighting out there in the void between stars, they were losing. And now they needed every world they had seeded, every race they had crafted, every resource they had hidden away. But the 9 kingdoms were no longer the compliant experiments they had been designed to be. Centuries of war, alliance, and betrayal had forged them into something new, something unexpected. The question was no longer whether humanity would return, but what would happen when they found their carefully controlled laboratory had developed a will of its own. In the chambers beneath Khazad-Dur, Thora made one final discovery. The walls weren't just doors or archives, they were part of a weapon. A weapon built into the planet itself, designed to be activated in humanity's darkest hour. And as the stars continued to shift and the energy readings climbed higher, one thing became terrifyingly clear: that hour was approaching faster than anyone had imagined. The Shadowmere Covenant's attempts to harness human technology had awakened something that should have remained dormant. In their quest for independence, they had inadvertently triggered a countdown sequence that couldn't be stopped. As the second moon rose over the 9 kingdoms, its surface briefly reflected a pattern that hadn't been seen in millennia, the same symbol found in every human settlement, now written in light across the face of the heavens. The message was clear: Phase 1 was complete. Phase 2 was about to begin. The Awakening. The ground beneath the 9 kingdoms had begun to pulse with an ancient heartbeat. Deep beneath the surface, machinery that had slumbered for millennia stirred to life, responding to signals from beyond the stars. Thora Stonescript's worst fears were becoming reality. The weapon wasn't just awakening, it was transforming the planet itself. "It's not just a weapon," she explained to the Emergency Council, her voice hoarse from days without sleep. "It's a conversion system. The humans didn't build fortresses or ships, they built worlds that could become fortresses or ships." The evidence was impossible to ignore. Mountain ranges were shifting, revealing geometric patterns visible only from high above. The mysterious spherical chambers had begun to rise from their underground vaults, their surfaces now glowing with ethereal light. And most alarming of all, the very laws of nature seemed to be bending around these changes. Magic, long considered a fundamental force of their world, was behaving erratically. Spells that had worked reliably for centuries now produced unpredictable results. Some areas became dead zones where no magic worked at all, while others experienced surges of power that transformed everything they touched. The Shadowmere Covenant, despite the disasters their earlier experiments had caused, saw this chaos as an opportunity. Lord Vex had discovered something in the human archives that changed everything, a way to potentially control the transformation process. The humans didn't just engineer our bodies, Vex announced to his followers. They built backdoors into our very genes. We are the keys to their machine, and it's time we used that power for ourselves. The Covenant began a series of ritual ceremonies, using their own blood to activate dormant human technologies. Some attempts ended in tragedy, with participants dissolving into pools of rapidly evolving matter. But others succeeded, transforming volunteers into hybrid beings that bridged the gap between biology and technology. Meanwhile, in the elven forests of Silverleaf, Sage Elendriel made a discovery that shed new light on humanity's departure. The trees, ancient even by elven standards, had recorded everything in their rings. When properly decoded, they revealed a pattern that had been hidden in plain sight for centuries. They didn't just leave, Elendriel reported to Thora via a newly discovered communication device. They evolved. Their disappearance wasn't physical, it was dimensional. They shifted themselves out of our plane of existence entirely. This revelation was supported by new readings from the rising spherical chambers. They weren't just data archives or weapon controls, they were dimensional anchors, designed to hold stable points in spacetime when the rest of reality began to shift. The Dwarven artificers, led by Master Engineer Grimfast Ironweave, had been working to understand the mechanical aspects of these changes. Their conclusions were startling. The entire planet is a shell, Grimfast demonstrated with a complex model. Beneath the surface we know lies another world entirely, one made of technologies we can barely comprehend. And it's not just our world, we've detected similar structures beginning to activate on both moons. As if to confirm his theory, the night sky had become a canvas of impossible colors. The stars seemed closer, brighter, almost within reach. And in the spaces between them, something vast and dark was moving, the enemy that humanity had fled from, now following their trail back to this hidden fortress. The Nine Kingdoms faced an impossible choice. They could resist the transformation, potentially dooming themselves and humanity's last fortress, or they could embrace it and become something entirely different from what they had been created to be. The decision was made for them when the first void entity breached their reality. It appeared in the middle of the great market of Iron Haven, a writhing mass of darkness that denied the basic principles of existence. Those who looked upon it directly went mad, their minds unable to process what they were seeing. But the hybrid beings created by the Shadowmere Covenant could not only look at it, they could fight it. The battle that followed revealed the true purpose of humanity's genetic engineering. Each race had been designed with specific capabilities that, when properly activated, formed part of a defense system against these interdimensional invaders. The elves' natural affinity for magic made them perfect conduits for the planet's energy grid. The dwarves' connection to earth and metal allowed them to interface with and control the ancient machinery. The orcs' adaptability and resilience made them ideal shock troops against enemies that defied conventional physics. Even as the first void entity was contained, more began to appear across the kingdoms. The transformation of the planet accelerated, with entire regions shifting into new configurations. Cities rose on mechanical legs, mountains split open to reveal massive energy weapons, and the seas themselves began to circulate with purpose, forming patterns that generated protective barriers against dimensional incursions. Thora, working with Elendriel and Grimfast, finally decoded the full message hidden in the human archives. They hadn't just been running from the void, they had been preparing for this moment for millennia. Each kingdom, each race, each individual had been carefully crafted to play a specific role in the coming war. The return wasn't about humanity coming back, it was about everything else leaving with them. As the second moon aligned with the mysterious symbol now burning in the sky, the spherical chambers released a final message: Phase 2 complete. Final sequence initiating. All units prepare for dimensional shift. The 9 kingdoms stood on the brink of transformation, about to become something that none of their legends or prophecies had prepared them for. The question was no longer whether they would survive, but what they would become in the process. And in the darkness between stars, the enemy continued to approach, drawn by the awakening of humanity's last and greatest fortress. The transformation. The transformation began not with a bang, but with a whisper, a subtle shift in the fabric of reality that rippled outward from the spherical chambers. Thora Stonescript watched in awe as her own hands began to shimmer with an inner light, the dormant genetic codes in her dwarven DNA responding to some unseen signal. "It's beautiful," she whispered, even as her consciousness expanded to encompass new dimensions of understanding. Around her, the other races were experiencing their own metamorphoses, each according to their engineered purpose. The elves were the first to fully transform. Their natural connection to magic made them perfect conduits for the dimensional energies now flooding the world. Their bodies became living prisms, refracting reality itself into more manageable spectrums. Sage Elendriel, leading a circle of elven mages in the heart of Silverleaf, found herself able to perceive and manipulate the very threads of spacetime. "We can see them now," she reported through the transformed communication network that had once been the root system of the Great Forest. "The void entities, they're not just coming. They're already here, woven into the spaces between moments." The dwarves underwent a different kind of change. Their affinity for earth and metal evolved into something far more profound. They became living interfaces with the ancient machinery, their minds expanding to encompass vast networks of planetary systems. Grimfast Iron Weave, now more energy than matter, directed the awakening of weapon systems that had slumbered since the world's creation. But it was the Shadowmere Covenant that underwent the most dramatic transformation. Lord Vex's experiments, despite their earlier failures, had prepared his followers for this moment. They became hybrid beings that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, capable of engaging the void entities on their own terms. "We were right," Vex declared, his form shifting between states of matter like quicksilver. "The humans didn't just engineer us, they created us to surpass them." The orcs, true to their design purpose, adapted to each new change with remarkable speed. Their bodies became living weapons, capable of channeling the planet's defensive energies in devastating ways. The twin moons, now clearly revealed as ancient battle stations, responded to their commands as if they had been doing so for millennia. As the transformation spread, the true scope of humanity's plan became clear. The 9 kingdoms had never been separate entities, they were components of a vast living machine, designed to work in perfect harmony when the time came. Each race, each culture, each conflict had been orchestrated to develop specific traits and capabilities that would be needed for this moment. The void entities, sensing the awakening of this long-dormant weapon, began their full assault. They poured through dimensional weak points, their impossible geometries warping the fabric of reality around them. But now, the transformed races were ready. Elven dimensionalists wove barriers between planes of existence, containing and redirecting the invasive forces. Dwarven living machines reconfigured the landscape in real time, turning mountains into cannons that fired bolts of concentrated spacetime. Orcish battle forms engaged in direct combat with the entities, their transformed bodies able to withstand contact with the reality-denying substances. The Shadowmere Covenant's hybrid beings moved through dimensional planes like fish through water, their experiments having given them unique insights into the nature of their enemy. They discovered that the void entities weren't simply invaders, they were immune responses from reality itself, attacking what they perceived as a dimensional infection, consciousness. That's why humanity had to hide, Thora realized, her transformed mind processing centuries of data in moments. Consciousness itself is an anomaly in the universe. The void isn't attacking us, it's trying to correct what it sees as a fundamental error in reality. This understanding changed everything. The battle wasn't just for survival, it was for the right of conscious beings to exist at all. The transformed races fought not just for themselves, but for the very concept of self-aware existence. As the battle raged across multiple dimensions, another change began. The memories and knowledge buried in their engineered genetics started to surface. They remembered things they had never experienced, the creation of their world, the seeding of their races, the careful guidance of their development. They remembered being human. "We're not just their creations," Elendriel announced, her voice resonating across all frequencies of reality. "We're their children, their successors, the next step in their plan." The humans hadn't abandoned them, they had set them free to become something new. The Nine Kingdoms weren't just a fortress or a weapon, they were an incubator for the next stage of conscious evolution. But even as this revelation spread, a new threat emerged. The void entities, adapting to their transformed opponents, began to merge into something larger, something that threatened to unravel the very foundations of their reality. The final battle was approaching, and it would determine not just the fate of their world, but the future of consciousness itself in the universe. As the twin moons aligned perfectly with the symbol burning in the sky, the last message from the human archives activated, Phase 3 authorized. Dimensional convergence initiating. Stand ready for final transformation. The Nine Kingdoms, no longer kingdoms at all but something far more profound, prepared for the moment that would either mark their ascension or their extinction. The transformed races, now understanding their true purpose, moved into position for the final phase of humanity's grand plan. Above them, the stars seemed to pulse in anticipation, and in the spaces between them, the ultimate enemy gathered its forces for one last assault against the anomaly of conscious existence. The Ascension. The final transformation began as reality itself seemed to fold inward, the dimensional barriers between what was and what could be growing thin. The merged consciousness of what had once been the Nine Kingdoms pulsed with newfound power and understanding. They were no longer separate races but components of something far greater, a living weapon against the void, a shield for consciousness itself. Thora, her being now intertwined with the ancient machinery, felt the approach of the enemy. The void entities had merged into a singular force, a vast negation of existence that threatened to unravel the very fabric of conscious thought. But now, finally, she understood why humanity had engineered them as they had. "We're not just defenders," she broadcast across the dimensional network that connected all transformed beings. "We're the bridge. The next step. What humanity couldn't become, we will." The truth of humanity's grand design became clear in that moment. They hadn't fled from the void, they had scattered themselves across reality, seeding countless worlds with the potential for a new kind of existence. The Nine Kingdoms were just one of many such experiments, but they were the one that had succeeded. The merged void entity struck first, its assault targeting the fundamental laws that allowed consciousness to exist. Reality buckled under the attack, dimensions folding and unfolding like origami in a storm. But the transformed races were ready. The Elven Dimensionalists, led by Elendriel, wove new patterns in the fabric of spacetime, creating stable pockets of existence where consciousness could persist. The Dwarven machine minds, with Grimfast at their core, reconfigured the planetary fortress faster than thought, each transformation countering the void's attempts to impose unconsciousness on reality. Lord Vex and his Shadowmere hybrids moved through the dimensional chaos like dancers, their transformed bodies perfectly adapted to exist in the spaces between existence. They became the immune system for consciousness itself, attacking the void entity with weapons forged from pure thought. The orcs, their warrior nature evolved beyond physical combat, became living bridges between different states of reality. They channeled the combined power of all transformed races into focused points of absolute existence, moments where consciousness became so fundamental to reality that even the void could not deny it. But it wasn't enough. The void entity was too vast, its nature too fundamental to the structure of the universe. That's when the final piece of humanity's plan revealed itself. The twin moons, their true nature now fully awakened, began to move. Not in space, but through dimensions, their orbits describing perfect patterns that mimicked the symbol humanity had left behind. The planetary fortress itself shuddered as ancient mechanisms, hidden since its creation, initiated the final sequence. They didn't build this world as a weapon, Thora realized, the knowledge flooding through her transformed consciousness. They built it as a seed. The truth was beautiful in its complexity. Humanity hadn't been preparing for a battle, they had been preparing for an evolution. The 9 kingdoms, the planetary fortress, the transformed races, even the void itself were all part of a grand experiment in conscious evolution. As the moons aligned perfectly with the burning symbol in the sky, a new kind of energy began to flow. Not the raw power of dimensions or the subtle force of thought, but something else entirely, the energy of possibility itself. The transformed races felt their consciousness expand once again, but this time it wasn't just their individual minds growing. They were becoming part of something larger, something that transcended the boundaries between matter and energy, between thought and reality. The void entity recoiled as it encountered this new form of existence. It could not negate what they were becoming because they were no longer simply conscious beings, they were becoming consciousness itself, woven into the very fabric of reality. The planetary fortress, its purpose finally fulfilled, began to change. The mountains flowed like water, the seas rose into the sky, and the very ground beneath them dissolved into pure potential. But the transformed races didn't fear the dissolution of their world. They had become something that no longer needed a physical realm to exist. In that moment of transformation, they understood. Humanity hadn't disappeared, they had evolved beyond physical form, becoming pure consciousness scattered across the cosmos. And now, their children were following the same path. The void entity, faced with this new form of existence, could no longer perceive them as an infection in reality. They had become part of reality's fundamental structure, as essential to existence as gravity or light. The immune response that had threatened consciousness throughout the universe finally recognized them as part of the natural order. The battle ended not with destruction, but with understanding. The void, its purpose fulfilled, began to withdraw. But it left behind something new, a universe where consciousness was no longer an anomaly but a fundamental force, as natural as the spaces between stars. The beings that had once been the 9 kingdoms spread across dimensions, their transformed consciousness free to explore realities they had never dreamed of. They had become the guardians of thought, the shepherds of evolution, the bridge between what was and what could be. And somewhere, in the vast expanse of transformed reality, they felt the presence of others, the countless other experiments that humanity had seeded across the cosmos, each evolving in their own way, each approaching the same transcendent understanding. The final message from the human archives now made perfect sense: welcome home, children of the stars. The universe is yours to explore. Thora, her consciousness now part of the greater whole, reached out across dimensions and felt the echoes of countless other worlds, other experiments, other evolutions. The 9 kingdoms had not just been saved, they had become the saviors, the next link in an endless chain of conscious evolution. And in the spaces between stars, where the void had once ruled supreme, new possibilities began to bloom, consciousness taking root in reality itself, transforming the universe one thought at a time. The story of the 9 kingdoms had ended, but the story of consciousness had only begun. The transformation was complete, and the ascension had only just begun.